properties, otherwise prime real estate into and repositioning them into free studio spaces for our artists. So since the late 1990s, we've had a history of working in some of the most iconic buildings in Lower Manhattan, where our first residency started in the original World Trade Center. We've also been in the Woolworth building. We've been in the Equitable building, 28 Liberty, formerly known as Chase Manhattan Plaza. And we've even managed to convert a former FBI evidence storage facility into viable places for art making. And again, our flagship program most associated with this model is, of course, Workspace, a 9-month-long studio-based residency program in Lower Manhattan that focuses on creative practice development for emerging artists. In addition to studios, Workspace offers space for experimentation and dialogue with peers and arts professionals, as well as career advancement opportunities. So since last September, LMCC's Workspace artists and residents were given studio space on the 12th floor of 101 Greenwich, generously donated by our partners Cove Property Group and Bentall Green Oak. By creating space for artistic production just blocks from Wall Street inside some of the most recognizable architectural feats, the Workspace program truly redefines what it means to, quote, work in Manhattan. Of course, the global health crisis, which we all still find ourselves in the midst of, has forced us to dramatically shift programming. We've had to close our studios back in mid-March and have gradually reopened the facilities as of late summer. We had to reimagine what it meant to bring our programming and cohort-facing activities online, and I want to truly commend this group for their resiliency and care they've shown for one another. Our collective participation in these studio visits is a demonstration of this, and we're so pleased to be able to share it with you all here today. A quick thank you, of course, to our generous real estate partners, Cove Property Group and Bentall Green Oak, who have been supporting the Workspace program at 101 Greenwich for the past several years, and to the generous funders of Workspace, which include Cal's Charitable Trust, the Dalmas Foundation, Jacques and Natasha Gelman Trust, the Rudin Family Foundation, the Norman and Bettina Roberts Foundation, the Mertz Gilmore Foundation, the Avery Arts Foundation, and the Stavros Niarchos Foundation. Now, on to the actual program. Again, we're conducting this event over 2 sessions today and tomorrow at 12 p.m. noon Eastern Time each day. And as you might have noticed, we formed 2 groupings by the way how our artists work intersect thematically and conceptually with one another. And the work by those presenting today touch upon ideas surrounding architecture, systems of power, public art, form/body and space, and even psychospace. So today we're joined by Zaq Landsberg, Zac Hacmon, Naomi Safran-Hon, Sydney Shen, and Christine Wong Yap. They'll be presenting in that order. Each of these artists will present their work and what they've been working on, then be asked a few questions from a fellow cohort member before moving on to the next artist. We'll hold some time at the end to answer questions from you, the live audience. So while the studio visits are happening, please feel free to send us questions via the comment section of the YouTube stream, and make sure to include who your question is directed at. And we'll compile your questions for the Q&A session at the end. So please do engage with us via chat on the live stream. We'll be dropping lots of links and handles too. And as I'm sure we're all tech reliant right now and know how frustrating it can be when it does go awry, we do ask for your graciousness and patience if we do have to iron things out along the way. And without further ado, I'd like to welcome Zaq Landsberg to the virtual podium. Hi, Zaq. Take it away.
I'm Zaq. I'm going to show you some slides of some public art projects that I've made. Okay, so here we go. So this is kind of the first large-scale public art project I made. It's a 1-to-1 scale stealth fighter covered in AstroTurf. It was kind of a hangover from the Bush years. And it kind of taught me some valuable lessons. So those are making things at 1-to-1 scale, making it easy to relate to the human body, having it low to the ground, having it hang outable, and making kid magnets because they swarmed all over this. Okay, so go to the next project. So this is a mashup of a NYPD surveillance tower and kind of a Louise Bourgeois spider at Socrates Sculpture Park in 2014. I was kind of surprised. It's made out of wood, just painted with gloss white paint. And people, even while I was working on it, came by and were asking whether it's a real NYPD thing or whether it's a sculpture. And so it kind of taught me the power of glossy white paint, block blue letters, but also this idea of making things at scale, making things with surface, and that the ability to kind of physically fool people's eyes and minds by tapping something pretty deep inside. Okay, let's go to the next project. So this is a replica of a tank used by the Kurdish militia to fight ISIS in Syria around 2014. And so the West wouldn't sell heavy weapons to the Kurds until a couple of years ago. So what they had to do is weld steel plates and to bulldozers or tractors or whatever else they had. And they painted them with these kind of crazy homemade camouflage patterns. And so I put it on this concrete pad at the sculpture park, Franconia in Minnesota, trying to make it look like a tank outside of a VFW hall, which is like pretty common out there. And it is a real thing, and it looks fun and trippy in a yellow submarine, but the reason why it looks fun and trippy is kind of dark. Okay, next project. This is a companion piece the next year after I did the stealth. This is also on Governor's Island. And I took this like big idealistic, literally above people's head symbol, brought it down to human level. And so, yeah, the idea of touching it at actual scale is kind of key there. Let's go to the next project. So these are copies of the islands of the Unisphere at scale to the actual piece. And so the Unisphere, also giant monument way above people's heads, built in the 60s, kind of in the space age thing. And so I'm taking this kind of 60s space age, America future, ever optimistic, putting it down on the ground, bring it down to human scale, but also making it a place to picnic, hang out, whatnot. And go to the next project. And so this is a copy of the Columbus statue in Columbus Circle, and it's cast in fungus. So I kind of had this experiment where I was like, is it possible to make biodegradable monuments? Can we adjust the conversation here with the material? And so this is a material that grows into the mold. And so this sort of controversy, do we leave the Columbus statue up or take it down? I tried to thread the needle. It looked nice for the opening. It kind of fell apart by the end of the exhibition. And so the last project I'm going to show you is the kind of next step on the evolution of the fungus, where I let it grow longer than the company suggests you should. And so this is a bust of Robert E. Lee that was in the Bronx Hall of Fame until it was removed in 2017. Bronx Hall of Fame is pretty weird, and I'd suggest you look that up. I could spend a whole slide presentation talking about it. But the idea is I'm trying to instead of doing Confederate figures and monuments in bronze or marble, what's the appropriate material? And I'm thinking it's fungus, a metastasizing, growing, searching for resources organism.
Hey, Zach, thank you for the presentation. And I have a few questions for you. It seems like we can identify two bodies of work, and one is more focusing on modern war machines, and the other is focusing on historical figures. And yeah, the question is, how do you relate the two?
I think, kind of like on a broad thing, my work is about power, systems of power, and America. And so the weapons are like the literal tools of this power. And so I grew up playing with G.I. Joes, building models of airplanes and things. So stadium flyovers and the massive amount of the American budget that goes into weapons, like these are really kind of seeped into the American thing. And so the other thing, the monuments are the kind of symbolic representation of that power. And so, I mean, it does take a lot of money if you're going to make like a giant copper statue, or a big globe, to have that, to decide what that symbol is, to put it that above people that big. And so like with both things, like putting them down onto the ground is sort of like literally putting them onto the ground that you can touch them, but trying to cut that authority down in what little ways I can, or whittle it down and bring it to human scale.
Yeah, and that brings me to the next question. It was amazing to see how kids interact with your work, and it's interesting to see the transformation happening to the sculpture, mainly in relation to its context, from a war machine transforming to a playground. So is that part of your thinking process?
It definitely is. You can go to the next slide. Basically, or the next slide after that. Basically, with the stealth, like access is this conceptual thing that we think about of like who can afford to go to the art museum or the gallery. But in public art, it's literally like, is it strong enough for people to climb it? Like, if not, you got to put it up tall, or you got to build a fence around it. So that started for me as like a literal problem that kind of turned into a like conceptual thing. Like the kids are a layer. And so they bring a layer of meaning, to like, I think art should be for everybody. And I want to bring this down to a kind of more democratic place, but also something that I can appeal to the most people possible on a wide scale. So like an entry point for kids, it should be easily understandable or fun to look at, and then I can layer the more complex messages on top of it.
And last question. I know you work on a big project now. Can you share with us what are you working on?
Yeah, you go to the next slide. This is a kind of a mashup of a reclining Buddha Asian style statue and the Statue of Liberty. And it's going to be in Morningside Park sometime this fall, I think. And so, yeah, it's like talking about monuments, talking about two ideas, smashing them together, and also making it hangoutable. But yeah, talking about kind of where we're at as a country of like, I think we're in a transition stage. I don't know if it's death. I don't know if it's going to nirvana or the next stage, but that's kind of what it's about. And then I have another project that is going to be in Fort Tryon Park. And Margaret Corbin was the first woman to fight for America in the Revolutionary War. She got captured on this hill that's right across from the cloisters. So I'm making this tomb effigy of her, kind of a mashup of medieval cloisters imagery and colonial America imagery in this like, I really like the cloisters because it's totally ahistorical and it makes no sense on that site. And so I want to like layer an American aspect of nonsensical historical context to kind of recontextualize this idealistic fictional history. Well, fictional and real history. That's what I'm up to, but I'm kind of interested on what you're up to and what you have been up to, Zach.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. My name is Zac Hacmon, and thanks for joining. I'm an installation artist and a sculptor. And in my work, I investigate the use of architecture as a tool for creating division and as a measure to generate identity. The first project we see here is called Take Me Back, and it's made of 39 used mattresses I collected from the streets of Tel Aviv. I assigned the mattresses to one another to form a kind of a mega structure, and then I dug a tunnel that goes through the mattresses. In order to create a new territory that is inaccessible and you can only look in but not go in. The second project is called Gateway. What we see in the picture is a small scale model of the proposal of Gateway. It's made of plastic sticks. I propose to create a crossing device which is inspired by border architecture. But here in my proposal, there is no border to cross. There is only the act of crossing. Because it's a big project to realize, I decided to create it in stages. What we see here is the first stage of Gateway, which is a one-person checkpoint. It is an interactive installation and offers an opportunity to extend the in-betweenness. As an ongoing project, I was invited to Smackmelon to create the second stage of Gateway. So you can see here, there's two sections of fences. And basically, the next time I will show it, I will add more sections and extend the crossing experience. Next project is called TAZ, Temporary Autonomous Zone. This sculpture is based on my memory working as a security guard after my military service. I built TAZ to closely resemble the typical security booths seen throughout Israel, signifying a sense of security and authority from outside. The inside of this claustrophobic space function as a private room. The viewers are invited to get inside this temporary autonomous zone and become security guard themselves. Moving to New York in 2015, I created this project called Capsule. The capsule is a compressed corridor space which functions as a slice of autonomous zone that has its own set of rules, inaccessible, but can be viewed through the windows. A clock is hanging on the wall inside on the right, but the viewers are not able to see the time. They can only see the side of the clock. During my residency at LMCC and continuing the previous project of the capsule, I created this site-specific installation called Unborn at the MH project space in the Lower East Side. I created these two new vessels. On the left, it's called capsule number 2. On the right, capsule number 3. And this intervention in the gallery transformed the space into a new order of public and private. Moving on to my most recent project, it's called Beyond the Pale, which was exhibited at the Border Project Space in Bushwick. It is a sound installation dealing with the migrant crisis along the US-Mexico border. This project is based on my volunteering trips to the Arizona-Mexico border. And during these trips, I volunteered with 3 humanitarian organizations and created a sound archive of all the stories and testimonies I collected along the way. The audio I recorded from the border was later played from speakers installed inside these sculptures. The sculptures are in the form of a military hedgehog, a massive border fortification. Their history traces back to fortifications used for the Atlantic Wall during World War II. Similar structures can be found on the Arizona border too. Together with sound, this installation aimed to create a border crossing experience in the gallery space.
Thanks, Zach.
My name is Naomi Safran-Hon, and I'm going to ask you some questions. And
Thank you.
Speaking of your last, I was thinking to both.
You were cut off. Can you repeat?
Sorry. What is the relationship to borders, with borders?
Yeah, I mean, I think borders reveal something. You know, when you go to the border, you see the system that you are part of, but without any filters. So especially when you go to visit a border between two countries that have conflict, you experience something very different from what is considered to be the norm.
So how do you bring the personal of that experience of the border, of migration to your sculpture?
I mean,
where do you get inspiration?
I have my own family history. I'm come from a Libyan Jewish refugee family that had to flee from Libya back in the 50s, had to leave without anything and just basically run for their life. And then growing up in Israel under the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, so that definitely shaped my perspective. And serving 3 years in the military, working as a security guard. So much of that experience, exposed me to reality that was kind of hidden from public perspective. So this huge disparity between the two sides, the city life and the borders, I guess it's became the driving force of my work.
Next, what are you working on?
What I'm working on currently, today is actually the last day of my solo show at the Slag Gallery in Chelsea. So, and at the studio, I'm working now, I'm building capsule number 4 and capsule number 5 for a group show in November that will take place at the Cat House Proper Gallery in Brooklyn. And for 2021, I'm working on a collaboration with a refugee shelter that is based in West Harlem. And for this project, I plan to work together with the shelter residents to create an installation. And that show will also take place at the shelter space, which is planned for the fall of 2021.
Great, thank you so much. It's exciting to see your work.
Yeah, and what are you up to?
What am I doing? Well, yeah. I'm presenting next and I'm excited after Zach. We're both Israelis and I think there's a lot of connection, very different. Can I go to my first slide, please? This is an installation. This is an installation view of my most recent show at Slag Gallery. Zach and I also slated to open in April, and that didn't happen because of COVID and staying home, but it opened later. Virtual, and also some were able to view it in June, late May and June. Slide. Next slide, please. This is a work called Taking Me for Granted. It's a piece I made. It has, it's a photo. In my work, I combine photography and painting. I'm trying to question what is the truth in photography and the fiction of painting, or maybe photography is fictional and painting has truth. In this space, you can see that it's hard to decipher on the screen, but the photograph is at the edge of the painting, and the middle section of the painting is just made out of cement and lace. I work in a very unique technique where I glue the photograph to canvas and cut holes in the photograph. Next slide, please. In this piece, it's made out of 2 panels. The panel on the right-hand side is a photograph that I glued to canvas. and I cut holes in the photograph and stretch lace and push cement through the back. Then I paint on top with acrylic and cement. The photographs are from my hometown, Haifa. I go back every time I go to visit my family, I go to photograph in this one neighborhood called Wadi Salib. And I think in a way it encapsulated so many of the political situation of the conflict, and also our relationship to home and space. The panel on the left is made of recreating the space just with cement and lace and acrylic. It is made in a technique that I developed where the cement holds the paint while it's wet, a little bit like fresco. Next slide is going to be a close-up of the panel on the right, and where you can see in the mattress, I cut parts of it out and I stretched lace, and then each hole gets its own lace pattern and color that relates to the photograph around it. Then when all the holes lace, I the detail of the I'm sorry, my internet connection is unstable. It was great before. This is a detail close-up of the panel on the left, and you can see the texture of the cement and lace. This one has no photography. Next, please. This is another installation shot from the show, and you can see the painting in the back. Next slide, please. This is a smaller piece that also was in the installation view before. I also experiment and make work without the photograph, just with cement and lace and acrylic. And the shape of the red pattern is made by cutting the fabric, that shape, and then embedding it in cement. The whole piece is one cement slab, so there's no canvas. Next, please. Next slide, please. This is a piece called The Pattern of My Surrender, and it's the same technique, but I embedded barbed wires in it. And I have to go quickly because I'm running out of time. Next, please. This is another installation shot of the exhibition. And the next slide, please, is a detailed shot of this piece. I'm interested also in the patterns and negative and positive shape that they make. Next, please. And this is a piece where I combined both the pattern making with the lace with the photography. So you could see at the edges, both on the right top hand corner and the bottom is made out of a photograph incorporated with the pattern. And I think Sydney. Sydney?
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, Naomi, thanks so much for your presentation. Yeah, so this is Sydney, by the way. And so can I ask you a few questions? Because I think it is interesting because even though our work is so different, we both do think about architecture's relationship to interiority. So yeah, I guess the first question I want to ask you is how "my" is a common word in a lot of your titles, and I'm curious about why.
So if we could go to the next slide, I went back to show you this piece is called The Pattern of My Surrender, and I feel like my work is very much about my relationship to home. My home is a very contested place, but I think that with COVID now, we understand that all of our lives are very fragile and all of us have a relationship to home. All of a sudden in March, we had to stay home and it kind of focused us to realize our home situation. And I think that putting the mind, the titles brings my own personal feelings and emotions. And I hope it evokes the viewer to think the same way. Like, what does that mean to you to look at a piece that uses such materials that don't have intimacy, right? Like cement is such a different material, and then putting yourself into it, and barbed wire, of course. So the intimacy comes from the use of my.
Mm. Okay, I see. And so maybe related to that, what is the relationship between the materials you use in your paintings and the content of the work?
Right. If we can go to the next slide, I chose to show you a smaller piece where you can really see the cement coming out of the photograph painting canvas. And I think that like I chose cement because it represents this brutal material, and I was inspired similarly from like Zac Hacmon from the separation from the border in Israel, the cement barrier that was built between Israel and the West Bank. And also a lot of construction in Israel is made out of cement. It's left bare. And so cement really represents an outside world, a political world. And the lace for me represents an intimacy, an interior space, our curtains, our doilies, our lingerie. And so in my work, they kind of interact, and the cement pushes out through the lace. And I'm losing you, my connection's so bad, I'm sorry. So that's kind of the tension between the materials, I think helps my content.
Mm-hmm. And so I think during your presentation, you mentioned something about cement kind of being used like fresco. Can you talk more about how you ended up using the cement?
I use cement because, yeah, I mean, I think I got to cement because I was interested in the way, if we could go to the next slide, I was interested in the way that material, sorry, I wanted to paint the wall in Israel, and then I got frustrated with oil paint that was just too slick, and I couldn't get it to feel like the wall. So I was painting a wall, a cement barrier with oil, and I got frustrated. So I wanted to use the actual material and have the viewer feel like they were standing next to a cement wall rather than an image, a representation of a cement wall. And I think in my work, especially in this piece as an example, I'm interested in like the truth and the fiction, right? So photography, we believe in photographs, but they are fictional too in a way. And then painting is fictional, but is it maybe the truth, right? So like kind of that tension between those mediums collide in my work. And if we could go to the next slide, there's a video of the surface of the painting, and we can just talk over it. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so so you do make work that's both abstract and representational. And how do you bridge that gap?
Well, I think this piece that we are looking at, the close-up of the video right now, it's the piece we saw before. I think it kind of speaks well about it because in a way, every representational has an abstraction in it. So if I zoom into a wall and you just see the wall, it's an abstraction. But if we zoom out, then it's a room and a space. So my work oscillates between the specificity of a space that we recognize with windows and then a more kind of close-up of texture that becomes abstract. I'm also interested in patterns, and patterns in themselves, because of the use of lace, have different, you know, relationship to abstraction.
Cool.
I find abstraction much harder to do than representational, but I'm interested in the space going in between in between those. Yeah,
Cool.
Thank you so much, Sydney. I don't know how we're doing on time, but I think we're out of time. I hope I'm gonna give you, if you could take us on, and I'm curious to see what you have for us.
Cool, yeah, thank you so much again for showing us your work, Naomi. That was super awesome. And so yeah, hi, my name is Sydney Shen, and I'm an artist working primarily in sculpture, occasionally installation, and even once a video game. So basically, I am a regulator of the ultimate void. Next, please. My sculptures and installations examine contradictions such as fear and wonder, pain and pleasure, or the sacred and profane. And I Frankenstein a variety of found and fabricated objects. Next slide. And I also destabilize motifs of the macabre, especially those which test the limits of the human body to evoke ambivalent states. Next slide. So Four Thieves Vinegar was a scented installation of sculptural interpretations of folk plague cures. And that was exhibited at Springsteen Gallery in Baltimore. So it was titled after a fabled elixir allegedly developed by grave robbers during an outbreak of the bubonic plague, which apparently protected them from infection by the corpses that they plundered. So before germs were known to cause disease, miasma theory conjectured that sickness was spread by inhaling foul-smelling vapors. So for this installation, I recreated the herbal Forties vinegar recipe and perfumed the space with it. So as you can see in this partial installation view, there's upside down chairs and manhole hooks, which are hung on a peg rail, flanking this manhole cover on the ground, which is there to suggest one sort of particularly absurd folk plague remedy. Next slide, which is to sit in the sewers. So the manhole cover sculpture on the right is engraved with the phrase in Latin, which means "fear of death disturbs me." And that is a refrain that's common to medieval poetic laments. And on the left is another artwork from the show that also utilizes text as a sculptural element. And that's a 3D printed velvet flocked fly swatter. So this is one of 4, and I made fly swatters for flagellants. That's fervently religious people who flog themselves as a form of punitive religious devotion, not flatulence or farting. So, so for flagellants to use on their own bodies, as well as the flies that would anticipate their corpses. And I had designed the swatting mesh with images and text inspired by the Italian early Renaissance prince, musician, and murderer Carlo Gesualdo. And he believed he was possessed by demons and his only relief was to be beaten, hence the text on the fly swatter, "I want my scream to count." So today it's speculated that these sort of exorcisms were actually a form of physical therapy for his actual ailment, which was acute constipation. So that's partly why I wanted to incorporate Gesualdo into this work about folk wellness remedies, because like flagellants, and actually, well, I suppose flatulence is also an aspect of this, he conflated his physical maladies with spiritual ineptitude. Next slide, please. So on the topic of classical music in bathrooms, let me pivot to another installation of mine involving those subjects called Master's Chambers. Next slide. So Master's Chambers was both a 2-room physical exhibition at Interstate Gallery in Brooklyn and also a video game. The video game was an evil twin of the physical show. It replicated the architecture and sculptures, but with a sort of tongue-in-cheek exaggeration of the spooky elements. So you can kind of think of the video game as like a haunted house version of the exhibition. Next slide, please. And so as you can see, the physical and virtual were sort of very similar. And the upper floor evoked a chamber music setup with sculptures made from stuff like a discarded piano, raccoon penis bones, and even my blood mixed with pig's blood. Next slide. And the lower room of the exhibition was a multi-stall bathroom. So you can see in the left stall, instead of a toilet, there's a monitor with a looped video of the game, and the stall doors are covered with stickers and graffiti that reference my other work. Next slide, please. And so this next slide is sort of a video of a portion of the game. And this work is quite self-referential because I'm interested in the way footnotes and marginalia shape a narrative. So I think of the video game as like a meta or parafiction and the exhibition as the primary text. So again, like sort of this idea of like a doppelganger or evil twin or even like a bootleg. And it relates to video games partly because fan fiction is a big part of a game's life in a sense that video games and sort of the peripheral media culture are integral to what constitutes contemporary myth and folklore. And next, so one of my more recent projects was this kinetic installation Onion Master at New Museum last year. And so basically I turned the New Museum's windows on Bowery into a arcade claw machine with onions as the prize. And the window text, which reads, "Flow my tears and lacrimae," are phrases borrowed from the English Renaissance composer John Dowland's songs about the varied reasons one may weep. Next slide. And so why did I choose onions as the prize? And can you start this video, please? So onions move one to tears when cut open, which reminds me of how sad clowns provoke a response. And also they're a vegetable that's considered quite humble and unremarkable. Yet at a county fair, I once saw prize onions win best in show at a vegetable competition. So that was really a scenario where I really didn't know whether to laugh or to cry. So next slide, please. So yeah, thanks for watching my presentation. This is my website and Instagram and email if you would want to reach out. And yeah, so now I want to welcome my fellow artist and cohort member, Christine Wong Yap, who will join me on the proverbial stage.
Hey Sid, it's so great to see your work, and I especially really like seeing how your installation and sculpture work also translates into like virtual environments too. That's really cool. So I was interested in how so much of your work has this kind of macabre or sinister feel to it, but at the same time, there are a lot of aspects that are very playful. So I was just wondering if you could talk about like play or playfulness in your work.
Sure. Yeah, good question. So at my show at Sophie Piner, next slide, please. This is an image from my show at Sophie Piner Gallery in Vienna last year called Every Good Boy Does Fine. And the show is titled after the mnemonic device used by children to remember the order of notes on a musical scale. And these sculptures in this view are made from antique children's toilets. So with this show, I was interested in heightening that sort of tension between the cute and violent. And I think there's something sinister about these old training potties that are disciplinary, which is sort of heightened in proximity to that title, Every Good Boy Does Fine. And also the corn in these plinths is kind of, for me, like an obtuse reference to the cornfield as a site of the beyond in science fiction and horror. And my favorite example of that is actually this one episode of Twilight Zone called It's a Good Life. And in this episode, this boy is like an omnipotent tyrant. And whenever something displeases him, he banishes it to the cornfield, which is a place off screen that is so inconceivably appalling that it can't even be depicted. So in that sense, he was definitely like a very bad boy.
That's really interesting. I was also wondering, because I have heard that you've got quite a few things lined up and they sound super exciting. And I just wanted to hear you share a little bit more about them.
Sure. Yeah, so I have a bunch of stuff happening in 2021. Next slide, please. Yeah, so early next year, I'll be showing portions of the Four Thieves Vinegar installation in an exhibition of both art and artifacts related to the bubonic plague at the Museum Het Valkhof in Nijmegen, Netherlands. And I also have two upcoming solo exhibitions, which will be my first solo with Gallery Vacancy in Shanghai, and also a solo institutional show with the Queen's Museum as the culmination of my Jerome Foundation Queen's Museum Fellowship. And so that's what this image on the screen is. It's a concept sketch from that show. And so for this show, which will be something of an immersive installation, I want to evoke the overlapping motifs of found footage horror, to crime drama, to fake news. And I'm going to be thinking about how the photographic process of enlargement can be a way to obscure rather than magnify or clarify information. So yeah, thanks everyone for watching. And thanks again, Christine, for asking these questions. I'm really excited to see your work next.
Thanks, Sid. Well, hi everyone, I'm Christine Wong Yap. Very happy to be here. So I'm a Chinese American woman in her 40s in a white room with some bandanas on the walls behind me. So I am a project-based artist, and I often use drawing, printmaking, and social practice to explore psychological well-being. Next slide. A lot of my work over the past few years have been participatory and research-based. And my projects tend to explore one dimension of well-being at a time, such as collaboration, interdependence, or belonging, which is something I've been continuing to explore over the past few years, as you'll see. Next. Another thing that I return to quite often is gratitude. Next slide. So this spring, I had the opportunity to thank medical workers by creating artwork for billboards in Times Square. And I decided to draw portraits of real New York City medical workers. So here you'll see portraits of 2 FDNY paramedics. Next slide, thank you. And then I also drew portraits of some nurses and union activists at a public hospital in the Bronx. And thinking about medical workers also plugs into another thing I've been interested in, which is resilience. And I've been interested in that for the past few years, and Workspace was a perfect opportunity to do some research. I came across a book written by 2 psychologists that has this great framework of resilience. And I'm interpreting that framework in a set of 21 drawings. So what you're seeing here is an example of a key drawing that kind of has its own sub-framework of 4 uses of resilience. And then here's another key drawing. This one is of 7 abilities of resilience. And these are smaller drawings that I'll do larger, and they're colored pencil on paper. And here is an example of one of the definition drawings that kind of breaks out one of the elements from one of the key drawings that you just saw in the last slide. This one is about emotional regulation, which I've been thinking a lot about through this past year. So for the past year, I've also been a lead artist on a project in San Francisco, Chinatown on cultural belonging. And this is a partnership with the Chinese Culture Center of San Francisco, as well as the Chinese Arts and Culture Coalition. So what we wanted to do was find out how does art and culture impact people's sense of belonging? And we asked people to contribute their stories of belonging. And over the past 6 months, I've been turning these stories into a 56-page comic book, which is available in both Chinese and English versions. And I'm really proud to say through the partnership that this is my most bilingual and most language accessible project to date. There's several parts to the comic book. For example, there's 3 illustrated maps of places of belonging. There's also multivocal scenes where different people describe what activities make Chinatown special for them, which often have to do with the use of public space and density. Which here's like a fun fact that not a lot of people know, is outside of Manhattan, but within the US, San Francisco Chinatown is the neighborhood with the highest population density. And then finally, another section of the comic book is made up of personal histories and remembrances of intergenerational relationships. So involving people in my projects always gives me an opportunity to learn. That's something I value the most about working with other people. And when I started out this project, I was focused on Chinatown. And one learning for me through this process is to also incorporate the legacy of Manila Town and the Filipino families who live there. So if you're interested in the comic book, here's where you can learn more. And then I have a few more images from the comic book in a video that we can play. And I'll invite Zaq Landsberg to join me back. And we'll bring this full circle.
All right, cool. I also have some questions for you. Your last couple projects have been about belonging, and I'm wondering, how has the initial idea of belonging, how did that start, and how has that changed, particularly over the past couple of months through the virus, through the whole Trump thing, through the Black Lives Matter protests? Can you talk about the evolution of the birth of your idea to where we're at now?
Sure. Yeah, that's a really good question. Thank you for asking that. I actually first got interested in 2016. So this is another kind of full circle thing because the current president told so many people that they don't belong through things like basically exclusion laws. And so my first project about belonging largely focused on immigrants. And I really worked with this phrase, we all belong here. And because feedback is a gift, and one of the things I'm still learning is that my process of decolonizing my projects and like recognizing that immigrants are also part of like settler colonialism too. Another thing I've been learning from somebody else is Brene Brown is a researcher who wrote a book about belonging, and her idea is that true belonging is something you carry within yourself wherever you go. So my original projects were specifically about places of belonging, and now I've opened up the projects to also kind of incorporate space for people who carry their belonging with them. I also had the opportunity to work with the Othering and Belonging Institute, and from that project, I was starting to think more about systems, policies, and practices outside of like the subjective and internal feeling. And then this year, there's just been so much where I realized that belonging is a lens that you can see a lot of social justice issues through, especially around police violence and the right to life, actually. Like the most fundamental right of belonging is to just have access to healthcare and be free from state violence in order to change all those health disparities in terms of illness and mortality.
Amazing. Okay, so my next question is, I feel like there are two really specific kind of identifying fingerprints of yours on projects. So one is calligraphy and like kind of your emphasis on, or kind of really elegant penmanship and text, and then your like real intense research, community outreach, survey-based, you know, kind of exhaustive hunt to get the best sample and the right group of people to do your projects. How did those two things develop, and are they, you know, are they related? Did they develop together, or did they develop separately, and did you like kind of weave them together over time?
I think that's a really astute observation that you made, Zach, because I actually did calligraphy a long time ago in grad school, but I was really interested in making it illegible. And then I didn't realize until we started talking that I had started using more legible calligraphy at the same time that I started doing research-based projects. And I think it's about like a sense of like mutuality and wanting to honor people's contributions so that other people could read them too. And I think in my work, I'm recognizing that like some of these concepts are pretty abstract for people, and that common forms and materials kind of lend like accessibility and a sense of abundance to them that I really like. So yeah, thank you so much for asking me these questions, Zach. I really appreciate it. I'm kind of interested in hearing what other questions people from the audience might have.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm back. I'm Bora. Yeah, we had a couple of questions come in through the chat. Thank you so much for engaging with us. This one's very specific for Nomi. Can you please talk a little bit about abstraction versus the literality in your work? Where and why do you make a piece that is less visually known versus a piece that is photographic? This is for Nomi.
Thank you. Wow, this is such a big, interesting question. I think that, as I mentioned in my presentation, I came to use cement because I was interested in painting the wall. And my first works with cement were totally abstract. I was in graduate school at the time at Yale, and I was doing like gray squares. I was just putting cement on canvas. And all my studio visits were like, "You doing Robert Reimann in gray?" And I was like, no, I mean, I love Robert Reimann, but no, I'm interested in a specific place. And, you know, Christine says so nicely about belonging, right? Where do I belong? And like, where is my home? And what is my relationship to that home? So then I started putting up, I always wanted also secretly to be a photographer, and I ended up being a painter. So life took me on this journey. So I put the photographs I took from home in my studio, and at one point they kind of collided. So I always feel like the photographs bring a sense of place, and that's kind of the literally of the space. And then the abstraction is the material, like the painting behind me, right? The abstraction of the patterns or the cement itself. That's why I said earlier that the abstraction is tricky in my mind, because I still want to communicate to a viewer. And I think that's maybe what all our work ties together, all of 5 of us. We think about the viewer. It's present in our work, the interaction with it. So for me, like, it's like a placeholder, literally putting you in a place, whether you bring your own psychological place or your own relationship to a home. And it doesn't have to relate to my home. And I mean, I could go on, but I'm going to end here because it's, I want to give some more space for questions.
Sure. Thank you, Nomi. This second question is actually probably more applicable for a couple of you. How have artists with especially larger scale practices, so maybe the 2 Zachs here in the room, and how have you adapted since the pandemic in working through these large scale projects that you had in mind? Any thoughts around that?
Yeah, I'll go first. It's been a kind of roller coaster for me. I feel very fortunate that I am working on 2 big public art commissions, which actually works with the virus because it's outside, and kind of, gives people a place to meet. And I'm really glad that I'm not like a jazz musician or something. And those guys are under a lot of pressure. It's been kind of a hassle and really difficult, kind of every aspect of arranging space, figuring out what's open, what can I do when, and what can I move at what time. But I mean, in New York City, I was starting to frame out the piece when concern about looting happened. So plywood was suddenly unavailable or very expensive, and then there were curfews. Even to get cartridges to use certain foams and chemicals, it's impossible to find, or was impossible to find, organic vapor things because everybody stockpiled it because of tear gas. So kind of and I'm still difficult to find good dust masks. So like at every aspect, there's adjustments that have to be made, and down to diabolical small details in big arc of supply problems. But so yeah, it's definitely been impacted, but it does make I don't know, maybe others act too, like figure out what is important, what needs to be in this, what do I need to do right now. And it's kind of a little bit nice to have like an end goal, and then to just push it through, figure it out, push it through the maze. What do you think, Zach?
Yeah, my strategy is to be, sensitive as possible. And, I just had a solo exhibition in Chelsea, and I didn't send invitations out to people because I didn't want to put any pressure on someone to come. So I'm trying to be as sensitive as possible, but to keep making art, keep working in the studio as long as possible. And that's why I initiated this collaboration with the shelter in Harlem, because I was supposed to travel to Arizona to continue my previous project, but I can't travel now. So I decided to find a partner here in the city. So I just did the research and I sent some emails, and we started this new collaboration that started a new project that I'm very happy with. And yeah, and we're very grateful to have LMCC that provides us the studio at the financial district. It just can't be better than that. Yeah.
Thank you, Zach and Zach. This final one that we have a few minutes for is for everybody. So someone asked, I'd love to hear how being in a residency together during the pandemic has impacted your individual practice. Feel free to chime in if
I definitely think having a cohort, and especially like when we were doing like weekly Monday night salons, was like a really nice like thing just to bring us together and like give us some focus and like build our sense of community. So I don't know how that like translated into my works or practice specifically, but I know it had a big impact on my life.
I mean, I'll say like after a couple months when we went back, there's a lot of small interactions when some of us are bored and just, asking, what are you working on or how are you doing that? There's a lot of things that like I realized were totally missing when I was just by myself working on something, of like being able to bounce ideas off of each other or lay something out and have, one of these super talented people just be like, no, there's an easier way you can do that. Or actually the first one looks better, it really like, it's kind of intangible and immeasurable, but really like all those little things completely add up and sharpen I think all of our practices.
Totally. I think you really articulate like kind of the benefits and boons of being in a residency program, just pandemic or not. So thank you so much, everyone, for your presentations and for so generously sharing your time. I think that about wraps it up for today. Again, thank you so much for sharing your practices with us today. And a quick shout out to all the staff behind the scenes. I'd be remiss not to thank them and call them out. To Tony for being our tech guru, to Joanne and Sophie, who have been our social media mavens, to Jasmine for monitoring all things back end. Thank you so much to our presenting partners, of course, Open House New York. I want to plug in another project that we're presenting as part of Open House New York, the work of poet Asiya Wadud in collaboration with artist Shannon Finnegan, titled Echo Exhibit. We should be making available the link in the chat as well. Hope you all get to check out the numerous other events and opportunities going on today and tomorrow. And please, please, please tune in again tomorrow at 12 p.m. for the second round of conversations with our other 5 artists.